Hi, this is Iris from Cashmere Goat in Camden, Maine. And in this video, I am going to show you a little bit about how to graft. Sometimes it's referred to as a Kitchener stitch. We're going to use the term grafting today. Grafting is essentially a way to create an invisible or nearly invisible looking seam at a place where you have live stitches that you are essentially going to be joining those live stitches into what looks very much like knitting. And you're going to do that knitting though with a needle and thread. So right now we're looking at an underarm that I have already grafted together, and we'll give you a little closer look about that in a second. I still have one underarm left to do, and that's the one that I'm going to demo for you. We're looking at the underarm of my Carp-Beth sweater by Kate Davies. This is the knit along that we're doing in January of 2024. And this is where I have grafted the two parts right at the underarm together. There's a little hole here. That's more to do with the carp scale pattern as opposed to the grafting. But the grafting creates a pretty seamless kind of a seam where I've joined one part of my sweater to another. So this is the before, what happened before I made that nice neat seam. So you can see it's this big gaping place right at my underarm, and I just do not want that kind of ventilation under there. So your pattern will typically have you've already placed some stitches on waste yarn at the place where you're going to graft. Also, sometimes you're grafting like the toe of a sock, in which case you wouldn't have stitches on holders like this. You'd have them on your needles. Same concept though. So we've got this place where we need to join some live stitches from one side to the live stitches on another side. Now, this is just a little tip too, because if you can see, when I do this, make this sort of smiley face with my underarm area, I've got all these live stitches in the center, but then I still have a little bit of what I call the gaposis. And we don't want the gaposis because that's essentially going to leave us with some holes. So a tip that I like to suggest is to, and this might be dependent on your yarn or your pattern, but for example, with this situation that I'm looking at here, I'm actually going to pick up a couple stitches on either end here and a couple stitches on either end here. So I'm going to pick up two here, two here, two here, two here. So I'm going to close that gaposis so I have one nice graft. So I'm going to get my needles on into these stitches and we'll be right back. True story, there was a little technical difficulty in that I did not actually record the video I thought I was recording for the very important setup row of your grafting. So before you get into the grafting, you've got just a little bit of setup to do. And so here's how it looks. And I've got this handy cheat sheet that I'm going to walk you through. So the setup goes, I'm going to walk you through my cheat sheet first. On the front needle, meaning the one closest to my body, this one, I'm going to insert this sewing up needle as if to purl and leave the stitch on the needle. And then on my back needle, i.e. the one that is furthest from my body, I'm going to insert this needle as if to knit and leave the stitch on the needle as well. So it's going to look something like this. On the front needle, I'm inserting as if to purl. I'm drawing my yarn through, all the way through, leaving the stitch on the needle. Then moving on to the back needle, I'm going to insert my sewing up needle as if to knit. And again, draw my yarn through the needle and give a little gentle tug. Don't want to be too tight with this, but just want the just right amount of tension. So that is the setup for your graft. After our setup, we're ready to do the real grafting now. So it's, in my mind, 2 steps. I have a step that I do on the front needle, 2 steps on the front needle, and 2 steps on the back needle. So let's start with front needle. This is where I will be inserting my sewing up needle as if to knit on the first stitch, and I pop that stitch off the needle. And on the second stitch on my front needle, again, we're talking about this guy, I'm going to insert my sewing up needle as if to purl, but leave it on the needle. So let's see how that looks. And I'm gonna see if I can keep my cheat sheet in the camera view while I do this. So I've got my front needle. With my sewing needle, I'm going to insert the sewing needle on the front needle as if to knit, and then pop it off the tip of the needle. Not gonna worry about it too much right now, that'll come in a minute. And then on the second stitch, I'm going to insert my needle as if to purl and leave it on the needle. So now I'm going to draw my yarn through, and that is done with the front needle. Now it's time for back needle time. So on my back needle, step one is to, on the first stitch, to insert my sewing up needle as if to purl and pop it off the back needle. Then on my second stitch on the back needle, insert my sewing up needle as if to knit and leave it on the needle. So here is my back needle. That's where all the action is going to happen right now. Step one is I'm going to insert my sewing needle as if to purl and then pop it off the tip of this back needle. And then in the second stitch, insert my needle as if to knit, and that's somehow a little bit tight right here, and I'm leaving that on the needle. And then drawing my yarn through, again, I have to kind of move it out of the way of my other needle tip, and just kind of gently, don't want to be too tight at this phase, just kind of gently pull that in so there's a little bit of tension. And under here, there's just some extra loops. Okay, so we have done both of those steps, and now I'm going to move on to just keep repeating this. So this is my grafted underarm, and you can see that I've got a couple of tails to weave in at the beginning and end, but it's a very nice, neat seam, and hopefully nobody will have their nose in your underarm, but if they do, what they'll see is just this very beautifully flat, smooth seam of what appears to be knit stitches. A really nice way to finish off 2 needles of live stitches with each other. If you liked this video, if it was helpful to you, please do leave us a comment, give us a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the Cashmere Goat YouTube channel. We appreciate your watching us, and thank you so much, and happy making.